Well, hi everybody. My name is Carol Elderfield and I'm the HR Director for Inclusion for Amey. And I'm joined by my colleague, Sunita Dulai, who will introduce herself.
Thanks, Carol. Hi everyone, Sunita Dulai, Account Director for Transport Infrastructure within Amey.
Thank you. And together we're going to talk about why inclusion drives a high performance culture. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about was really why having a diverse team really does drive that high performance culture. So Sunita, why do you think that Amey is so successful in this regard?
I think there's been a multitude of things that all lead to that culture, really. So I think we have a strong message from our leadership team around our freedom to perform culture, Carol, and I think that really sets the stall high around how we want to work and what we expect of our employees. And also it allows that flexibility and it empowers our teams and you get that engagement so that people can make decisions and they're not constrained by boundaries, and actually people are empowered to make the decisions of their role and they have that flexibility to do so. So I think once you set that culture around being able to do that then lets you to think differently about what those teams look like and the type of people that you bring in. I think we also have a strong culture around recruiting for attitude, and again I think that helps. You're not bound by technical skills, and in some cases you are, and those technical, especially in our industry, are needed, but actually because you can think broader about how the types of different people we can bring in, again it just opens up the opportunity. We've certainly found that when you have those diverse teams and people feel much more engaged, you're then bringing in people that enjoy being at their work and their work is appreciated, and then they're feeling empowered, and again that engagement leads to thinking differently. So I've certainly found that when my team are engaged and people within the business feel that engagement, you certainly set the benchmark high around performance. People are able to feel themselves, be themselves at work, and again it's not that the sort of having a work you and maybe a home you're just you, and it's that being your whole self at work. So I certainly think that all of those things are elements of what drives that high performance culture. And I think that sort of sets the context of then people being able to feel comfortable and again being able to broaden how we operate in our industry, and we can only certainly bring innovation and drive all the improvements that we want by that diversity and by thinking differently. So I guess that's how I think we've contributed to that.
Yeah, and that really bears out in the analysis that we've done, doesn't it, around some of the analytics that we've undertaken on our key performance indicators. So we did an exercise recently where we took 3 very well performing contracts actually with some really great account directors leading them. However, what we found was that the account that had the most balanced leadership team around diversity actually outperformed the other 2 accounts, even though they have really strong leaders, by a minimum of 25% on each of the KPIs. And certainly the engagement KPI was 50% better. The profitability, safety, the revenue, all of the harder measures, they were at a minimum of 25% or 30% better. So there's a real compelling case for having diverse teams, because it brings that, as you say, difference of thinking, and the evidence that we have certainly demonstrates that. And we are not concerned about breaking the mold and making sure that we have that difference of thinking and a little bit more risk taking than perhaps we have in the past. And what we found is that it really does create stronger, empathetic leaders. Collaboration with both internally and externally with our clients is incredibly strong. We're reaching out into the communities, we're reaching out into society. Under Amanda and Michael, so Amanda's our Chief Executive, Michael's our Group HR Director, we have a very strong levelling up agenda. So we've lifted everybody, as you know, out of the kind of minimum wage, and we pay the real living wage as the minimum. We have nobody in SSP, you know, so if anybody's ill, that they're off work and they get paid properly so that they can recover properly and get back to work quicker, and again perform better when they come back to work because they've taken the time to get well. And actually, we, through the pandemic, because we had already taken a lot of attention to our well-being agenda, had really no issues in the pandemic, did we? So we paid shielders full time, full pay. We paid any COVID illness, we paid as full pay, and we didn't find that we had a spike in absence at all. Our absence followed the trajectory. So that for me feels like we've got a leadership in our organisation that is based on trust. And do you feel that that helps drive the diversity of the business because people are trusted?
I absolutely think so. I think we adapted so quickly to working remotely and actually completely taking our operations from our accounts and depots to being at home. And, you know, yes, we had teams on site, but we were able to deploy them safely. We moved our planning and programming teams to be working at home. And you can't do that unless you have that trust and in that engagement. So absolutely, I think the success of our performance last year is a testament to how that engagement actually is. And I think it was people, everybody dealt with it in their own way, didn't they? It was certainly a challenging time, but I think having those touch-ins with your team, I introduced sort of no meeting zones with mine, you know, lunch sessions where we would just have a coffee break, and everybody had to work a little bit creatively to again think about how best to engage those people and make sure everybody was okay. But we've all certainly just had to, again, that's just knowing your team and knowing what works, and we've had to think differently about that. We've had sort of been forced to do that in one sense, but absolutely it has increased productivity. But at the same time, we're much more aware of people's well-being, and you're in touch with people. It's you can reach out to people, and that comes from being able to know that you've got that trust and that engagement with the business to do that. So I think I think that's been a key driver.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that our performance in 2020 was really good, and it was much better than 2019, and that was based on reduced revenues and obviously a very increased level of spending on PPE, protective equipment for people, because we had 10,000 people working on the front line, and we empowered them in a way that they'd never been empowered, didn't we? So we built safety precautions throughout our whole business to keep people safe at work from COVID, but they were tailored locally by the local teams who know the way that they work and how to work best. And actually those decisions are still being made. So we really have moved decision making to the lowest competent point, which is another real key benefit of being able to attract diverse people into our team. And certainly for me, that whole flexibility piece, we were always a flexible workplace. We'd already got 1,000 people working flexibly out of the 16,000 or so that we have, but we've now got in excess of 4,000 people working flexibly. And even in our front lines, they're working more flexibly than ever they did before, with staggered shifts and the ability to take breaks along the way whenever it suits them rather than when it's programmed in. So our performance as a result, our bottom line performance is, even in 2021, showing an upward trend through that, not just diversity of thought, but that whole empowerment, the moving the decision making to the lowest competent point, the leveling up the agenda that we've got, and just that ability to feel trusted. I mean, I feel, I've worked with Amey for 6 years, you've worked with Amey much longer than me, but I really feel a difference in the way that we can work. I feel valued, I feel trusted, I feel I can be it myself. If I'm feeling anxious one day, I can kind of say, hey, I'm not feeling great today, I'm feeling a bit anxious, just bear with me. And nobody bats an eyelid, do they? It's kind of like, it's become the norm, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the technology that we've empowered our operatives with now as well really again helps. It's just a different way of engaging with them. We launched Springboard last year around our ideas platform, and in some sense you would think, was that the best time to do that? But absolutely it was. You know, we were showing our teams that we want to hear from them, and we want to hear from them in a different way, and being able to empower them in that way meant that we actually came up with some amazing ideas of, you know, how we can be more productive, how we can be safer. We had strong levels of engagement through a sense of doing things differently that came last year, which I think you might not have had if we were all working to still traveling around the organization, or still working to rigid programs, and not. I think the flexibility around shifts and operational flexibility that we've had to adopt has again been a massive change in our sector, which has probably been coming for so many years, but because of COVID, we've been able to accelerate that, and it's certainly true with innovation and doing things differently with tech. But absolutely, I think operationally this industry has progressed because of what we've had to go through last year. So I think that's helped.
Yeah, and I think we've done an awful lot more in the diversity space, and we've moved from talking about equality and diversity very much to inclusion, because we think if we can be consciously inclusive, then that's very positive, and it's a very positive step forward. And a lot of the work that we did around understanding privilege, which was really misunderstood. So, you know, there was a lot of furore around white privilege and everything else, but actually it's about understanding that some of us are born with a privilege that we just have it. It doesn't matter whether you're white or whether, you know, where you're from. It just means that some of us are born with a head start, and understanding some of that diversity and cultural difference has made a massive difference to us in Amey. Those lived experiences that we've talked about through those sessions. I spoke to two of our Black community recently, and what they've said, both of them independently actually, is that they absolutely feel that they belong in the organisation, because having had those sessions, they believe that the organisation is listening. People are understanding it now. They're understanding it for what it is. It's not divisive. It is something that is just happening. And therefore, if we understand it, we can support people better. It may not be happening in work, but it's certainly happening outside of work. And we can support people better. We can make space for them at work where they can be themselves, bring them whole selves to work. And both individuals that I've spoken to have said that they've both got an energy that they never knew they had. They're both performing exceptionally well. And one of them actually is probably on the brink of being promoted as a result of that fantastic performance. And the other has just said, I just feel completely invigorated because I'm able to be honest about who I am. And therefore I'm able to perform at my best. And if I'm not at my best, I can just tell you I'm not at my best. So I think those lived experiences, those personal stories of work, not just through our multicultural teams, but through our Women at Amey, our neurodiversity, our Pride network, because people are beginning to feel that they can be really open and talk about what barriers get in their way of just being great. And certainly in your role, which has changed considerably as well, hasn't it? But you were catapulted in front of our bid teams, and you started to be responsible for our work winning. So why do you think it has a competitive edge for our work winning?
Again, it was a bit different what we did there, Carol.
Yeah, it was very different.
So I was head of business improvement, and I took on business development and bidding, and led the work winning team for our highways and waste sector. And again, that's not the norm in our industry. But what I was able to do was bring structure, you know, and process, but also have a different way of thinking about how we approach business development and bidding, which is usually quite siloed and very functional. People think about the approvals and the governance and things that go behind that, but maybe not about, well, how do you create those winning solutions that actually represent what that client wants and what the communities need? How does your solution offer up what's right for that community? And actually, is it even the right client? Are our values aligned? So I think there was an element of the team thinking differently around what it meant to have a great, compelling offer. It wasn't just getting the price right and getting the right operational solution. It was much broader than that. So, and you can see that in our sort of strike rates is now above 80% within the highway sector.
Yes.
So again, we've kind of transformed our approach to how we bid and grow the business around thinking again differently about what we've maybe done even just as close as 3-4 years ago. So I think we're a learning organisation, and I think that's the key thing for me. We learn, we change our approach, we're adaptable, and we look at what's the right thing for the customer, the client, and the communities that we work for. And very much about, I think our contracts work great because they're embedded into that area and that network, and very much represent the community that we're serving. So it's not about what is the Amey wide offer. It's about what does that local community need, and how best our people live locally. 90% of them live in the communities that they work in, so they know best about what drives that, and that comes into how innovative we are, or what we're doing aligned to our social value plan, and actually things that make a difference, again, to net zero commitments. So it's a much broader link to the outcomes that we're there to deliver, rather than the kind of we don't really think about the contract terms or anything. It's more about why are we here, and what do we enable our communities to do. So I think building all that into our business development and bidding approach has certainly been different, but I think it's worked.
Yes.
I would encourage organisations to, again, I think you said calculated risks earlier, is do something a little bit different, push the boundaries, and you might not know what the end result's going to be, but it's certainly going to be a positive one, and I think that's what we found.
Yeah, and I think we've been very selective, haven't we, about there are some clients that we'll work with, there are clients that we won't work with, because we're absolutely not going to go into a race to the bottom in terms of profitability. And we've actually stepped away from a number of contract opportunities because our work is all about winning contracts, but we have stepped away from a number of those because the race to the bottom on profitability means that we can't invest in being a learning organisation, we can't invest in our wellbeing agenda, we can't invest in getting the recruitment right. You end up with those contracts where basically you can just about make the service work and you can't invest in anything else, so you don't become a rounded, well-managed, well-respected organisation, and you're certainly not a destination organisation for young talent coming through. And that's why I'm so excited really about the inclusion agenda that we have, because it's really based on that high performance culture. It's based on it being the right thing to do anyway, but our chief executive Amanda, our group HR director Michael, they genuinely believe if people can be themselves at work, then they will perform, because the freedom to perform culture is all about engaging, empowering, and then you will excel. And we can certainly demonstrate that we're well on the way to achieving that. And I know that we had an innovative people agenda through the pandemic. We threw away all of the bureaucracy. We made decisions in minutes. We made decisions within hours. We changed them within 5 minutes because the government changed. But nobody really got uptight about that. Everybody just went with it because they knew that we were working very dynamically. And it's been a fantastic opportunity for our organisation to demonstrate the capability that it has within it already. And to maintain that, we are really thinking about our people strategy as we go forward. And the underpinning of that flexible working, the well-being agenda, and the ability to continue to be a learning organisation are all top priorities for us in order to continue that. So if you were to say any final words about why you felt really invigorated and inspired by the last 2 years in Amey, what would they be, and what advice would you give to other organisations?
Okay, last few words.
Yeah.
I think it's the empowerment.
Yeah.
I think knowing that you have the freedom and the flexibility to make decisions, but that you're also supported when you need to be, and that you have that flexibility within your role. And my thing is, I think what I found has worked well with the teams that I've had is not everybody's perfect. You're always going to have some people that are great at something and other people that can be something else, but it's finding what that optimum team looks like, and then honing in on those skills and actually nurturing them, and not focusing on people's weaknesses, and that to drive the best out of people, and about really valuing that difference, because that's what it means. Because being different isn't, no one role, no one account director will look like the same, but there's something about that one that is different, and how do you nurture that? So I think that's certainly something that I've had to learn to do, and I think it's helped me be a better leader. And I think that's something that I've learned from our leadership team as well in the last couple of years. But if I was giving anybody any advice, it would be, nurturing that inclusiveness and allowing people to make mistakes and make decisions, and to be supporting them through that.
Yeah. I think that's just a perfect sum up. So thank you very much indeed. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you.